Hi everyone. Today is the 19th of August, and this is the Ignite developer meeting. And we have a couple of different things to cover this time. First, we normally do a round of introductions. We can do one quick one too. We have still some people joining. Anyways, I'm Lucas, maintaining the project, have done some different things in the Kubernetes space, and now starting Ignite. And yeah, we have Dennis.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Dennis, and I'm also an Ignite maintainer and the main engineer. And I've not done Kubernetes that much, but I'm very familiar with systems programming. And then Lucas invited me into this project.
Cool. And
I'm Lee.
Yeah. Perfect.
I like to be helpful. Yeah, container stuff is my jam. Also have a dog.
Awesome. And we have Dieter already on the call.
Yeah, hi, here's Dieter. So I'm working with Lucas since a couple of years with all stuff about containers on ARM. I'm a Docker company called New Vector from based in San Jose in Silicon Valley, but I'm basically based in Germany, and I'm working since a couple of weeks with Ignite, try to get this thing running on ARM on a Raspberry Pi, for example. And lastly, did some tests how to use that efficiently on Intel machines as well. So build my own kernel, build my own root file system, and try to make things fully automatically so that I can spin up an Ignite host and a couple of VMs fully automatically. So that's currently my goal. But all done on a side project currently.
Cool. And I think Nathan
definitely sounds like
joined.
You could sell that. So
Pardon?
It sounds like that's something you could sell.
Yeah.
Or give away for free to large companies.
Let's see. So currently it's just for fun. Because you have to know, I have done a lot of things with kernel builds, building root file systems. So Lucas know me from the past. We had built a complete operating system with a built-in Docker for Raspberry Pi 2 a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. And that was Hyper project. And so you get to know how to build the kernel, how to build the root file system, automate all the things. And right now with Ignite, I would say it's the same story again. I don't have to start from scratch. I know all the principles. And what I really love about Firecracker and Ignite, I can use all the tooling I know. Let's see what happens.
Cool. And then we have Nathan, I think, that joined. Do you have your audio?
He says hi in the chat.
Yeah.
So, hello.
Okay. We can maybe. Oh, right. Yeah. He says the mic is not working. Anyways, thanks for joining. Cool. And let's see what kind of action items we had from last time. I think, well, it was mostly about the releases. So now we have 0.5 and 0.5.1 released, which is really nice to get the stable releases going for this project. the change logs are over there, and I mean, really a lot of thanks to our contributors who made this all happen. Then we have a GitOps toolkit refactor, which maybe Lee could help talk about. And then, yeah. Lee, could you talk or like say a couple of words about the?
Are we going to link the design doc? Did we make that public?
I think so.
Okay. I'll go look for that. So what Lucas and I have been working on is that it's a pretty novel feature inside of Ignite right now, the GitOps support that we just merged, which is that it allows you to provide a repository that Ignite will sync up to. The repository structure could be arbitrary, but then when you define manifests in some directory, that Ignite as a controller on the repository manifest can then put those into its storage backend and then use them as a way to track and update the state of what's happening inside of Ignite back into the repo. And so the repo is a declaration and also active record of what's happening with the virtual machines. It's GitOps, but it's native to Ignite. There's no glue code in between. And we are obviously super interested in making sure that people can do this in a really open and pretty standard way. And so GitOps Toolkit is this idea that we can provide a library for people to assemble some sensible ways to put GitOps together. And so whether that's a controller running as a long daemon in a cluster or some event-based hook in some cloud provider's control plane, that we can use GitOps Toolkit to assemble how things are put together so that we have shared interfaces for people to program around. And that could be anything. You know, you could write a GitOps controller natively, you know, to patch your assembly line, or, you know, maybe the next thing is going to be WASM containers or something like that, right? We could do that natively with a GitOps controller. Is anybody kind of curious? I know, you know, we have a bit of a niche audience at the moment, but hopefully it would be helpful for other projects. Cool. Well, anyway, we'll publish the design doc, and we're looking to get that up and working to where people can vendor it and make their own projects. And so that would probably necessitate that Ignite would vendor GitOps Toolkit at some point.
Yeah, and to start with, I think that, or to start with, it's just going to be a pure code refactor, basically, so that we move packages from one place to another, but eventually then make something that you can write your arbitrary applications as Git backed for, like, it can be anything, like your Terraform, whatever, or your web server that is using Git as a database is a silly example, but I mean, all those kinds of things that are triggered or controlled in a declarative way can use it as a lightweight database, basically. And
as somebody who's operated like Puppet and Chef before, I think that like a web server with a Git backend is like a great idea. like such a good idea, actually.
Dieter, do you think you could have use of something like this?
Currently, I didn't look into this feature currently, but let's see in the future. But sounds promising.
Cool. And then next up we have some. So we're getting the Footloose. So unfortunately, it seems like Roberto from Aqua Security didn't have the possibility to join today, but he's been working on the Footloose integration to make that happen with Ignite. So you can set backend Ignite in the Footloose manifest, and instead of using normal Docker containers that are run as so-called container machines, you can use real virtual machines using Ignite. And it's like you can think of Footloose as Docker Compose for Ignite, and lets you manage sets of machines. And yeah, it's going pretty well. Dennis is helping also to make it more stable, and so we can do a release of it fairly soon. And so that's going to be Footloose 0.6. Will include support for the latest for Ignite, basically.
And initially the support will be just very basic, so you can set a couple of variables for the VMs, such as how many CPUs, how much memory. But of course, Ignite has much more advanced configurability than that, and that will have to be supported in a later release. It's not targeted for this initial one. Currently, we're just aiming for it to be able to spawn clusters of machines, tear them down, and get the networking and SSH access working.
And the good thing about having it working with Footloose is that, for example, at the moment, as Ignite doesn't work on a Mac because, well, KVM requirement, you can run using the same Footloose file, just set backend to Docker if you're on a Mac or similar, and it will execute in Docker. And then when you go on a Linux machine, backend Ignite, and it still works the same. So that's kind of the plan for that. And yeah, found a couple of bug fixes and that kind of stuff too. Then Containerd support ongoing, and we're hoping to add Containerd as a supported backend for running the Firecracker daemon, basically. So that now at the moment we run Firecracker inside of a Docker container, and that's hard-coded to exactly a Docker container, but we don't want to have that requirement in the long run. So instead, using Containerd, we can have a smaller footprint container runtime to provide isolation for the Firecracker daemon, because the Firecracker daemon can't run or shouldn't run on host for security reasons, and it needs some kind of sandboxing. And Containerd is a really lightweight and stable solution for that kind of isolation, and also setting up like networking and other things like logs, attaching, similar.
Mm-hmm. Any time estimate for this change to support Containerd?
We're hoping so. Now like last Friday we got the 0.5.1 out, and I hope that it takes like ideally this week, basically, or like end of this week, or next week sometime, to get it. We basically are envisioning to 0.6 could be exactly 0.5, but just adding Containerd.
Yeah, there's no need for a rush. If you say in a couple of weeks, that's fine.
Yeah, but
sounds good.
We would really like to have it, because it's I mean, it makes the code better in many other places. Places too. So so that we just started on some of those, and yeah, other those things. We have Ace, who also can't attend due to a meeting conflict, basically. Well, it's timing with these meetings are always really hard. People have their own like in their own companies. So yeah, but he's been working on the Firecracker metadata service support. So probably we'll get that into. So you can like have the metadata service that Firecracker has is basically functioning like a really lightweight version of the AWS Node Local API, so that you can like hit a web server and ask some kind of metadata about the local context. And with Ignite, you have that kind of small web server, but you feed it when starting the VM. You feed it what kind of JSON content it should serve.
Is that use case to like proxy cloud in it?
For example, I think that should be doable. But it's like the generic implementation overall. But I think
Like, would we run on one of? It's just in a data center. Like, yeah. I would think you would just run one of those, right? So are we going to run the Firecracker metadata service on every node, or is that a required component? Or
oh, right, yeah. So the Firecracker metadata service is built in in the Firecracker daemon, basically. So it's run like it operates on the TCP stack, which is interesting, but
not fully understanding the use
case.
case.
So basically, when you have a packet from the VM that asks for a certain IP, what is it? 169, 254. 169, 254. It goes, and normally, if you request from google.com, it's gonna like route outside to the outer world and come back.
Yeah, it's gonna be intercepted.
Yeah, but then if you have this special IP or special whatever metadata server packet, then it ends like at the Firecracker process level and gets back to you. So
it doesn't even really get out much into the hosting user space.
No, it doesn't at all.
It's inside the VM completely.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting thing. I don't know if we have users for it or something, or exactly what it could be used for, but yeah, it's one of the things that Firecracker support, and it's more about like exposing those things.
I guess yeah, that's good if you want to run like Cloud init, because that's going to be usually over the network. But most of these things also allow you to just use like a file, right?
So for metadata, or
yeah, like a JSON file, for because we have the ability to modify the root file system. All right.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So normally the like really. So for example, in the kubeadm guide, what we do there is copy over the files, because we have Ignite run and then copy files. So that's how I envision like doing 90% of the times or something. But then this is more about just exposing the thing that Firecracker has.
This thing is going to be probably running before the VM even starts, though, right?
Yes. So it's like a inside of the Firecracker process. This thing is.
Wow. Oh, okay. It could be useful for stuff on boot. Interesting.
We'll see.
Yeah, typically you can use that, inject some configurations, and it depends on the services you would like to run in your VM, and the VM just calls an API and say, okay, give me the configuration, and the API is just a web call, but the web call is not going outside to the public world. It's just let's say the endpoint is just served via Firecracker process itself. So it's pretty fast, it's pretty secure, no one can intercept that network connection. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think the main benefit I'm hearing is that this you only need a TCP stack. You don't need any file system dependency in order to get the JSON,
Yeah.
which could be really good for early boot.
Yep.
Where you're changing the file system so much, but
Perfect. So now let's see.
But currently, come back to the MMDS discussion. So typically, this configuration will be held into the Firecracker binary or process itself, right?
So typically what you do is you mount, or like you copy a file from disk on the host to disk on the root file system on the VM.
Yeah.
That is the typical thing, but this feature is then a more dynamic variant of it, so that when you start the VM, you say, here's the metadata I want from this file or something. And then you can do a curl request inside of the VM to get exactly the field of that metadata blob that you want to get.
It feels like an API.
Yeah, it's like an API. It's like a web API thing, like a small web server operating on that blob, basically.
Okay.
And then during runtime, you can change the JSON blob on the metadata service. So
okay, good.
Yeah, well, we'll see if that kind of thing takes off. And
I could also see the benefit there that while we have the file copy from host to the VM root file system, that is basically on creation time only, because when the snapshot stack is assembled, then we can't modify the root file system externally anymore.
It's a static thing, one shot.
Yep. Exactly. And if you want to have a dynamic service that depends on the host or depends on some external variables upon startup, what is the role of this VM, then that could also be applied into the dynamic MMDS to be fetched on boot.
Cool. And yeah, so Nathan just slacked me. So I'm gonna share my screen and just quickly go to the repo here. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Perfect. So we have a couple of different milestones. I'm just gonna shortly about contributing flow and that kind of stuff. So we're probably gonna do a 0.5.2 with some really small bug fixes and design. Dieter, you, for example, asked about the design. I'm hoping to be able to draw some diagrams and write up a formalized thing of that. We are probably going to add some K3S demo, how to run an Ignite VM and quickly get Kubernetes running. But then more about the more features here. We have like Containerd, the metadata service, and some different other things. So Chanwit, who's, well, it's very very late where he's based now in the evening. So, but he's working on the Kubernetes virtual kubelet implementation, and as we go forward with these things, it's going to be more like client server model, which allows us to not operate as root. So those things are like the higher level design where we're going. But then I was asked to point out some good issues to start with, and we have. Let me see what was I thinking. So one is the Vagrant, or like one thing that would be really nice to have This is, we have a thing in kubeadm called pre-flight checks, which are, well, this looks like a lot of code, but, or well, it is, but it's all kubeadm specific. It's not the pre-flight checks in themselves. But basically we have a set of, before we start doing anything with kubeadm, we check that, well, we have at least 2 CPUs. Then, well, we have at least, like, these ports are open because we're going to bind to them. It will fail otherwise later. Or like these files are existent, and or this directory should not be existent. So what we would need for Ignite is way more lightweight than this, because well, Kubernetes has a lot of more requirements than Ignite. But the same idea would be a really good thing to get started with contributing. So basically, check that dev KVM is available, and so what we have in the installation guide here, let's requirements and dependencies. So yeah, so here we go. Basically, have a small pre-flight check that before you do Ignite run, it checks that the mount binary is there. Umount tar makefs. Those small, they're really basic and should be installed on most systems. But for example, makefs ext4 is not installed on CentOS by default. So that is a good thing to check for. But these are, like, for example, makefs, we tried to re-implement it in Go, or like have some way to do it, but well, that's really it's better to defer that kind of logic to the real thing, and so that's why we depend on those, and that's a good contribution to fail fast if there's something that is missing, for example, KVM.
Mm-hmm.
Also, now that our docs have been updated and we don't have the time to always skim through them, for example, here should be a table where the CPU architecture support level thing should be. So doc updates and fixes are always welcome. Like this one, figure out what happened to the table, and also if the formatting is on point on the other pages.
Yeah, I just realized that too.
Yeah, just happens. Fix it.
Yeah. those kinds of things, and yeah, in general, guides or blog posts on that kind of stuff is one of the best ways to do contributions too. Because I mean, this project can look, or it although the user interface is I hope at least pretty user friendly, how Ignite actually works is not. Like what really happens is not that straightforward. So those kinds of things. But yeah, so this is the footloose, for example. At the moment, this is the kind of, as an example, as we talked about it, this is a sample footloose file. And the only thing you need to do is to set backend to Ignite. But these footloose in itself could also use contributions on the general project if people are interested in that, especially on the documentation side. But otherwise, this is how it could work. Yeah, that kind of thing. And let me see if I find some other good thing. The Windows subsystem for Linux, that would be personally really cool to get out, but it's probably a bit far off. Needs to stabilize that kind of feature in itself. Yeah, we have different kind of but actually I'm interested in, now that we started thinking about blog posts and guides and that kind of thing. Dieter, you talked about something really interesting. Do you have any actual plans to write blog posts or similar guide to use it, or what?
Yeah,